What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Southern Jeep and 4x4. Today we're going to be doing backlash and ring gear runout, and also going to be finish assembling the Dana 44 rear axle. As you can see, it's already been completed. I didn't expect the first video to be so long, so I had to basically take the video and break it up into two parts. So this is going to be the intro for the video, but the axle's already completed. So, alright, let's get started. Alright, so now for the main event, we're going to put in the carrier. It's going to be a mock-up again. We're going to get our caps, torque them to spec. Then we're going to check ring gear runout and backlash, and also do a paint pattern on the gear. And then we're going to remove the caps again and throw some RTB on the shreds, because these holes go all the way through, and it's a potential oil leak with these being through threads. So the way to do this, back in the day, they'd had a case spreading tool that would go in both of these tabs here, and you hook it up with a dial indicator, and it actually spread the case, you know, within the spec or so, to make, and you could just drop in your carrier and your races. Another way you can do it, and this is the way I've always done it, is we're gonna put the races on the carrier, and then they're gonna be kind of cocked to the side, and we're gonna tap it in. So that works too, because I don't know where to get a case spreading tool at. Let's go ahead and put your races on. Actually, this one might kind of go right in. There we go. Oil on the bearings. And it'll help if you move the pinion back and forth too. Oh, look out. Give a little persuasion with rubber hammer is pretty dirty. Make sure we don't get any dirt in here. They're pretty tough, but going through all this work, I hate for a little piece of dirt to ruin everything. Alright, so we got our cap, and I marked them because these marks weren't very visible to me, so I went ahead and put a notch here and a notch here for this cap. Let's go ahead and get that started. And then same thing for this cap. So I got two notches here and 2 notches here. All right, we'll go ahead and just zip them down real quick. All right. Now you can go ahead and torque them. And the torque range on these is 70 to 90 foot-pounds. So I'm going to do 80. And it didn't click yet, so I'm just getting them drawn down a little bit more so nothing goes in there crooked. And then we're going to do a X pattern. Alright. Just going around again, make sure they're where they need to be. This will be important for checking backlash. All right. Oh yeah, that feels good. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and set up our dial indicator, check backlash, then we'll check gear runout, and then we'll do a paint pattern once everything else checks out. All right, so I got dial indicator set up to do backlash. I'm using a mag base and dial indicator. You're gonna set preload on the dial indicator, so that means your needle's, you know, got some tension on it, a few thousandths, so it's got preload. So now to check backlash, you're not going to touch the pinion. You're just going to rock the ring gear back and forth. We'll get our stop measurement and then let it take it back the other way and see if it zeroes out, and that's our backlash. So we got about 9 thousandths. The spec's between 5 and 10, so it's on the higher end, but still within spec. And we'll just confirm this with the paint pattern. I'll go ahead and put some paint here on the ring gear teeth, and then we'll rotate the whole carrier and pinion assembly and be good to go. Going to take a paint marker and just pour on the paint, and before it dries we're going to rotate it. All right, it looks good. I'll go ahead and move the camera and show you. All right, so there's our paint pattern. It's consistent all the way through on the heel and the toe of the ring gear. You know, if we had just paint contact on this end and no paint on here, we know that that would you know, if you had a bad backlash setting, that would confirm that the backlash was off. And the same thing goes if it was just up here or just on the bottom. If it was just on the bottom or the top, this being the top of the tooth, that means your side gear, your ring gear, is off side to side. And then your heel and your toe is your pinion depth. So we got good constant coverage all the way. So I'm super happy with that. And one last thing to check, we're going to check ring gear runout. So got the dial indicator set up again, and I got a mark. That's going to be our start point. And we're going to rotate it a whole 360 degrees. And we're going to watch for positive and negative movement. The spec is, it cannot exceed 6 thousandths. And hopefully this needle doesn't get snagged on this ring gear and give us a false reading. If it does, you know, I'll try to reposition it again. So all you're gonna do on this is you're just gonna rotate, turn the pinion. So go ahead and watch. And you want to go nice and slow with it. So right now we're going positive on the reading. So we just had to jump there to 3 thousandths on this portion. So I'll just write a 3 there. Alright, so now we jump back down. Just trying to go nice and easy. Alright, so we got jump to 4 here. Alright, so now we're zeroing back out. So I'm going to write a 0 on here. Yes, that's a 0 to me. Alright, so starting to go a little negative. I got a thousandth negative there. Alright, so we're back where we started, and the needle's barely negative a 0, so our dial indicator setup held up pretty good, or I mean real good. It's just barely off 0, so that could have just jumped with a little piece of dirt or something on the ring gear. Yeah, it didn't exceed 6 thousandths, so we got just a tiny bit of wobble here in the ring gear, but it's going to be okay. Video by finishing up the pinion. So put a little bit of oil around the pinion, and we're going to go ahead and install our slinger. So basically what this does is just keep the oil from pouring out. And we're going to install our seal. It's a pinion seal. This is available at southernjeepand4x4.com. I have the SKU in the description, but the seal is going to go just like this. I lubricated it just a little bit, and we're just going to sit it in there like so. And I'm going to get a socket to fit around here. I don't have any external seal drivers, because we want to make sure this goes on nice and straight. Alright, so we're just going to do it the way I've always done it. I'll just give it some taps. Alright, should be seated all the way, because we don't want it to leak. It'd be a real pain. I'm gonna go ahead and throw some grease on the splines for the yoke. Again, just make everything easier. Then get our yoke. And our washer again, and we're going to put some never seize on the or anti-seize on the threads. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and torque the nut one last time. Got it at 210 foot-pounds. Alright. Here we have it. Go ahead and rotate it back down. And it's gonna stiffen up on you when you install that pinion seal. And you know, so don't be alarmed if it gets too tight. You know, if you think it's tight, it's just a new seal in there. That's why when you're doing all these measurements, you know, that pinion rotating and stuff, that's with the seal removed. So, and then also good practice to lubricate that seal too, because you don't want on the first run to get overheated and start pouring, you know, ruin the seal and you got a bad pinion. It's going to be axle shafts, hubs, and brakes. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to remove the old bearing off the axle shaft and press on a new bearing, and we'll go from there. Alright, so you're going to be at the press again. Go ahead and just throw the axle shaft down in here. Let me raise up the jack real quick. There we go. Go ahead and center it up. And we'll go ahead and press. It's just going to fit right in the dies on a pretty much like a slip fit. And they shouldn't be under a lot of pressure. I already pressed out the other axle shaft, the long side. This is the short side. And didn't give me much of a problem. Let's go ahead and run this nut down so we don't damage the nut. There we go. Go ahead and just press it on down. We'll just hold it. And there we go. That easy. All right, so installing the bearing, we're going to do the same process. Just put it in the dies of the press. I put a light layer of grease on the shaft, and then this bearing gets greased like a wheel bearing. You pack it the same way. When we go to put the axles in, I'll explain what makes these axles unique over other Dana 44s, and that's one of the reasons there. So go ahead and press it in, and there's no shims that go behind this bearing. So once you hit that shoulder, the axle shaft is all the way. There we go. Once you hear that last pop and the grease squeeze out, you know you're done. And it's going to be the same exact process for the other side. Alright, so before we put the axle shaft in, we're going to install the outer oil seal. There's no inner seals towards the carrier. Some axles are like that. I'm going to go ahead and try to get this centered up. It helps if you put a little bit of grease around the seal. Just makes everything slide a little bit better in there, because if you don't get this in here even or have a bad spot, you're going to mess up the seal. So my seal installer, we got a taper here. I got it flipped upside down, so we're going to go ahead and flip it back and then drive it in all the way. It'll stop. There's a little machined ridge in the axle case, or tube I should say. Alright, you don't want to go too crazy because you don't want to damage the seal. Let's go ahead and put the shaft in. Everything gets a little bit of grease. I put a little bit of grease. That's where the seal rides on. Go ahead and slide it in, and then you're just going to turn it until it makes contact with the side gears in the carrier. So there we go. So next step, we're going to install the bearing race. Go ahead and drive that in all the way, and then onto the backing plate. Yeah. Gotta move the camera kind of in the way. Alright, so now it's all flush. Everything's good. So now we have a spacer that goes on the flange with some shims and a series of gaskets and the outer grease seal. It's not an oil seal, it's a grease seal that keeps the grease out of the backing plate. So go ahead and throw all that on and then bolt the backing plate on. Alright, so the next step is going to be to install the bearing retainer. There would be shims behind this bearing retainer. Here they are here. These are new and available on the website. But if your race was sticking out for some reason, you could shim the bearing retainer. So go ahead and put that retainer back on. And the next thing is a gasket. Just going to go ahead and put this gasket on. There we go. So one quick thing before I forget. Normally you wouldn't put a gasket behind here. I mean over the bearing retainer. The backing plate would go there, because you use both of these gaskets in between the backing plate and this dust cover here. This dust cover is gone, and I can't find any replacements for it. All it does is just kind of keep the brake dust and stuff from going and messing up the outer seal, which we'll put on here in just a second. I'll grab it right here. The seal here that goes on the outside of the backing plate. So instead of, you know, doing a double gasket, we'll just throw this one on, then the backing plate, then a gasket and the outer seal. So here's our backing plate. Pull this back a little bit. I need to make sure. Here we go. These original backing plates cleaned up real nice. There we go. So before we put the backing plate on, we're going to put a little bit of old gasket sealer. This is a shellac base gasket sealer. Works real good with paper gaskets. This is what they would have used back in the day. Sometimes these paper gaskets don't like RTV, and we don't really want water, and mainly water, keeping water out. A little bit of grease isn't really going to leak out too much, so we'll just put a little bit of this on here. And then on the backing plate, I just scuffed up the paint a little bit to get that to adhere a little bit better. I didn't want to leave it bare because, you know, I don't want this rusting anymore. Spent 50 plus years rusting. And then we're going to do the same thing with the outer gasket. This is basically just to keep, you know, dust and a little bit of grease out. The oil seal is going to take a majority of the brunt. So go ahead and just put a little bit on the outer hub seal here. Alright, we'll go ahead and tighten up the backing plate, put all the bolts in, and then when we go to put the hub on, it's going to seal in here. So, alright, so before we put the hub on, we're going to go ahead and get all the brake shoes and everything installed. So we're going to go ahead and start by installing the wheel cylinder. It's just going to be two little 1/4-inch bolts, bolts from the backside. Don't need a lot of torque on them. Then the next thing we're going to put in is the brake shoe adjuster eccentric. There's a brand new one right here. The only thing these don't include is the nut and the lock washer. It's going to be a 3/8 fine thread nut. Let's go ahead and install them. The threads are on the back of the backing plate. And then now, alright, so I'm going to show you a pretty easy way to put on brake shoes. Quick tip on brake shoes. So if you notice here, this brake shoe, the lining goes the whole length of the shoe, and this one is only partial. So there is a difference. So this is going to be called your lead shoe. It's going to go towards the front of the vehicle, and then your lad shoe, or you know, like your secondary shoe, is going to be at the rear of the vehicle. I can't really remember why it has the shorter lining as the primary. It's been a while, but I think it was because of heat dissipation, because you had less surface area and would dissipate heat faster. So we got our hardware pins, and here is our cup and spring assembly for the pin. This is going to be your basically your hold down, and then we got your a brake hardware tool here. So what I like to do is these Jeeps are a little bit different than a modern, you know, more modern style drum brake system. There we go. Let's try that. So what I like to do is here's our mainspring here. If you notice, there's two different angles on the hook of the spring. So I'm going to hook one end on this way and the other on this, and then the same thing for our bottom spring. Go ahead and install it. I'm trying to do this all in kind of a three-handed job. Just gonna do it off camera real quick. There we go. So it'll look like this. So we already got our adjusters in. You can try to do it with them out, but it'll give the shoes something to kind of hold on to. So I'm going to go ahead and try to put in our our bottom. Yeah, this is kind of a three-handed deal, and I'll show you another way you can do these if you choose. I just think this is a lot easier than the other way. There we go. We're gonna try to get our hold down hardware installed quickly before they decide to shoot out. All right. You can see there's a notch, so it goes in the notch and then you turn it to where it basically locks in. There we go. There you go. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the pliers and I'll show you the other way. Alright, so the other way you could do it is, you know, put your bottom spring in and then use these brake spring pliers here. It's got a hook. And then you can attempt to put the spring in on the top. It's kind of a pain, you know, trying to get it exactly perfect. So that's why I decided to do it this way. So all right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the hub on, and I'm going to put a little bit of combination of anti-seize and grease on this, just in case it ever has to come off again. Put some anti-seize in the keyway, on the shaft. And we're going to install our key. And if you notice, there's a little cutout on it. It's going to go towards the axle. Alright, so we got a new hub here. It's a brand spanking new hub. The old ones got a little bent using the puller, which is pretty common, you know, especially trying to pull it off with that taper fit on the axle. So I got a new stud here, got some anti-seize on it, and I'm going to show you an easy way to put these studs in. If you were to use a press, you run the risk of bending and damaging the hub. So if you go ahead and put them in and get them started, give them some taps with a hammer, and then put you on a thick washer, and then, and sorry about the camera, this tripod's a little short, but anyway, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the threads of the stud. We don't want to burn those new threads, and I got an old lug nut. These originally were left-hand thread and right-hand thread, depending on what side of the Jeep they were on. These are all going to be standard right-hand thread, so it's going to be lefty-loosey, righty-tighty all the way around. So we'll go ahead and get the nut started, and we'll just go ahead and use the impact, and it's going to pull it. It's going to go ahead and pull it. Let me see if I can get the camera set up so you can see that. And so you can take the impact and go ahead and draw it in. It's that easy. We'll just take our washer off, and now we got a installed stud, and you know it's nice and flush when the little bit of anti-seize squeezes out, and didn't damage the hub or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and put the 4 more on, and then we'll get ready to put it on. So here's our hub. Just line up the keyway, and then I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the back of the hub where it mates to the basically the dust seal. Alright, we're going to take our hub nut washer and our hub nut. We're going to put some NICs on those threads as well. Alright, so this has a cotter pin set up in it, and what we're going to do is torque it to 150 foot-pounds. And see if we line up. If we don't line up, so the spec is 150 to 175. So now the tricky part's going to be not flipping this axle over. So I'm going to try to hold it. Alright, so I had to do some finagling off camera. Got the cotter pin hole lined up. Just going to go ahead and bend our cotter pin back. Alright. We're going to take our brake drum. So you got three little I don't know, screws that hold the drum on to keep it from flopping around. Just line them up, and then same drill, more NICs, because these are kind of a pain to take off once they've been in there for a while, and you know, if you got to service the brakes, they got to come out. They should only be screwdriver tight. Alright, so here it is, all complete. One thing I didn't film or explain is the grease fitting here for the axle bearing. So normally on a semi-floating rear axle, these bearings will be oil lubricated, so you wouldn't have to worry about it. and these take grease. So, you know, every time you do, I don't know, I grease mine about twice a year. You know, just a couple squirts. But that's what separates these from a, you know, a modern semi-floating axle is the grease fittings, and then also the taper fit axles, and then your bearing race retaining rings. So there's no C-clips in the differential like you'd find on a more modern semi-floating axle, where, you know, that the axles slide in and then you insert your C-clip. There's none of that in this. It's just retained here by the plate, retains the race and everything. So, all right, everybody. Well, I appreciate y'all watching. Remember, these parts are available at southernjeepand4x4.com. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and you know, drop a comment below. Make sure to like and subscribe if you already haven't. And have a good one. Thanks for watching.